to Our Future is Kind, a podcast exploring how we build the future we want to live in, one kind act at a time. I'm your host, Michael G. Neece, president of Our Future is Kind, and your trusted companion as we search out kindness strategies we can use in our everyday lives. Together, as we chase the idea of building a kinder future, we will interview experts in kindness, team building, human motivation, corporate culture building, relationships, plus politicians, artists, and those with a vision for a healthy and kind future, one we all want to live in and deserve to enjoy together. In addition to interviews, we will consider positive depictions of humanity's future in art, literature, movies, and media. And we will issue kindness challenges each week, give an update about Our Future is Kind, the company, and what it's doing to stay true to its mission. So, let's dive in. Welcome, everybody. So glad to have you back on Our Future is Kind podcast. Today's guest I am so thrilled about because he is a man of so many talents. It's going to be a little hard to describe them all. So let's dig in just a little bit. Erik Neill is a native Texan raised in the Chapel Hill suburb of Carrboro, North Carolina. He got his bachelor's degree in business science from North Carolina Central University in 2004. He is a 6th degree black belt and the former founder and operator of Neill's Taekwondo and Fitness LLC. He retired from teaching martial arts in 2017 to pursue acting and stunt choreography full-time. Erik's film credits include 𝐼𝐸𝐾, Darkness of Man, and his new release anticipated in February on the 15th called Loose Ends. Film production credits include Darkness of Man, Stories, and Calls, the short film. And he's currently working on writing and producing his own film, and the production is anticipated for March of 2026. Erik Neill, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It is my honor and privilege to be here and doing a fun podcast with you, sir. It's exciting to be considered for the kindness that I perpetuate in my career and in my pursuits of arts and working with lots of different kinds of people.
Well, if anybody's seen a lot of different kinds of people and a lot of different pieces of, humanity and lots of different kinds of interactions, I think it's you. And so it makes a lot of sense that we would get you on the program to talk about this. So I introduced you, but what are the things that you would say about yourself that the listeners and viewers should hear about?
Well, I think what's really notable about me is that I do my best to try to really be extroverted. It really recharges my soul, and I absolutely love interacting socially with people. I thrive so much in that environment that it's a daily part of my rituals so that I stay positive. I have this grand gift for empathy, and my parents are brilliant teachers. They are teachers in life and finance and health and in mental health as well. And so a big part of my growing up was talking about mental health. And that gives you a real different understanding instead of being steered away from those topics or even ashamed of them. It's very, very different. And I've interacted with so many people in my professional and personal life that have all had a different scope of how they were taught to approach and discuss their own feelings. And as a function of that, it makes it easier, I believe, for me to reflect in kind to others and to reach out. I made a big concerted effort last year. I had a physical injury and I'm a very active person. And as an active person with a physical injury, it was not only physically trying, it was really emotionally trying. And so I made one of my intentional rituals to go to a local fitness gym and look everyone in the eye and say good morning. And it became something that, it was great. It was so powerful. Oh my gosh. It became something that was absolutely pivotal to my physical and emotional recovery, knowing that I could come back again another day and get another reinforcement. We seldom tell each other you did a good job because it seems maybe superficial or our little achievements aren't celebrated as much. Well, hear me say, my friend, I celebrate many achievements, very minuscule and some significant, but I celebrate them very often.
It's wonderful to bring a spirit of celebration and joy to what you do, and I think that's really admirable. In that routine of going to that workout facility and acknowledging everybody, and then also getting that feedback from everybody that you matter as well. What have you been back a lot? I mean, do you get that sense that everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, it's Erik"?
Well, what's so fun is it's created something totally new. See, when I started to go back, I had had a huge stint where I was pre-op and then had a surgery and then was off my foot for 2 months and then physical therapy for another month. And so I was very much missing from any regularity in the culture at that gym. And the goal is regularity. When you see the people there trying constantly all the time, they're the ones who kind of take their AirPod out and they go, "So I see you here a bunch, good for you. My name's Erik, what's yours?" And it propagated so much with me just reaching out and looking someone in the eye and saying good morning that I have a laundry list of friends that are now also personal friends that are just socialite buddies in the gym. And we sometimes work out our jaw muscles in conversation a little more than the other bigger muscles because we're just so enamored with the social environment that we really created. And I try to do that everywhere. I was having a fun time working on a movie with some friends, and my friend Greg comes up to me and he goes, "I didn't even recognize you. You're jacked." When I realized he hadn't seen me for 6 months, but also he saw me just after I got back into the gym. So I was doing some exercise, but I was also still very crippled by the physical therapy that was demanded of my Achilles tendon recovery. So I see him now 8 or 9 months after I'm going really hard in the gym and doing extensive Taekwondo and running a lot. And he didn't even recognize me. He's like, "Wow, man, you've made a transformation." And so the other people acknowledged that in my gym that the physical transformation is only a component, and the emotional transformation is allowing people to kind of reciprocate that kindness.
It's lovely. It's so good. I've always admired how you connect with people, and I think it's okay to share with our listeners and viewers. We've known each other for a bit of time, and
Oh yeah.
and consider each other to be really good friends. The context in which I first knew you was in martial arts. And so I really wanted to dig in there and talk to you about that because I feel like most people who are outsiders to martial arts, most people who don't do Taekwondo or Kung Fu or karate or anything like that, they look at it and they see people harming each other. They see violence. They see aggression. They see people jumping around with punches and kicks and weapons. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how kindness plays into martial arts? And in particular, there is one expression that I've heard over and over again. It's, I guess, a legal term as well. Minimum force required. I know that that's something that, if you wanted to speak to that, that would be great. But just in general, how do you see kindness in the martial arts?
Well, I think kindness in the martial arts is a prerequisite, and that if you're not getting the kindness that enables your learning, it's not going to be conducive to a healthy learning environment. You can learn in hostile or non-ideal conditions. I I started my martial arts journey, and I remember this young blonde-haired, bubbly guy biking over to the Taekwondo Academy with his new instructor uniform on, going, "Hey guys, let's do some front kicks." And I was like, "This guy appreciates front kicks. I'm not getting bored thinking I'm hot stuff, and this guy, he's excited to do front kicks." And then you were very articulated about what you were striving for and how you evaluated yourself. And I thought that was so fun that I set those standards for myself as well. And then other kids in the class that were next to me that had any struggle whatsoever, my kindness enabled me to reach out and say, "Switch feet." And I'd say, "Switch feet," and
Yeah.
it's the other block. Do this block now. Don't do that block. That block's later on in the pattern. That brought out a lot of leadership in me. And our first instructor, Master Jewel Herbert Allen, was an amazing leader, and he was also very kind. And what I really loved about his kindness was that he would nurture you enough so that you would be vested. And he invested in his students. He really, really invested in us. Um, and so I was lucky enough to work with also, who's now Chief Master Michael Wakeman when we were young, and I believe a currently employed in the American Taekwondo group, also a Miss Pamela Smith that we got to work with, and all of these were leaders in the community, and the way that you approached it was so unique. I wanted to emulate that more than any of them, combined. I wanted to have Master Allen's hook kick. I wanted to enjoy it as much as Michael Neece. um, I was also really lucky. I grew up in a really safe place, where you went to undergrad and UNC Chapel Hill. That's my hometown as a kid. And sure, there were some bullies and stuff, and there might have been a fight or so, but there was not a lot of violence. And so I was more approached with having to use my verbal martial arts than having to use any real physical aggression. And I did get in a scuffle or two, a little kerfuffle, and I it didn't solve itself by using martial arts. That was an important lesson that I had to understand. But also, people who were very threatened by the idea that I would be able to protect myself or to exert force onto them needed to hear from me that I wasn't going to do that, and that if I did, it wouldn't work. I remember a bully succinctly needing me to tell him that if I had tried my martial arts on him, that it just wouldn't work. And when I told him it wouldn't work, it stopped the conflict. He no longer needed to bully me. It was fascinating. And so this kind of verbal martial arts that I had taken to as a function of talking about a lot of my feelings and trying to identify the way and the reason that people behave the way that they do has led me from being the performance artist that is your kid's martial arts instructor after school to the performance artist that pretends to be your kid's martial arts instructor after school as we make a science fiction film.
Right. Yeah. No, yeah, I have long admired the fact that we knew each other in a context where I was the instructor and you were the pupil. And then you just kept going, and I found other pursuits in my life, and I ended up taking classes from you. This is actually something that I highlight in a book that I wrote called In Kind, where I said all of there you go, there's a copy of it for those of you who are watching. Yeah, where I spoke about the fact that I loved the approach that you would come into the classroom, and you were kind. It wasn't about ego, it was about how do we transform ourselves into better versions of ourselves, and how do we honor and respect each other as we are all doing it, which made it so easy to just fall back into the rhythm of jumping and kicking and blocking and doing all those great things with you, and finding the joy that you definitely bubble over, not just into your martial arts, but these days also into the film industry. So if you'll indulge me, that's my next big question for you is, you go into these different situations where you are maybe acting, maybe you are somehow helping with lighting and sound, or you are producing, you're doing these really cool things to make this art form that shows up on our screens at some point. Is it always kind? Do you find that there are ways of having kindness in those environments where you're making films?
I have found the most amount of kindness in the films that are made by creators that are there regardless of what they've financially invested and what they have to financially gain. The capitalism of entertainment detracts from a lot of the kindness because it draws to fear, the fear of financial insecurity, the fear of being left out or excluded, and fears of being ostracized regardless of your kindness. One of my greatest achievements is to be mentioned in this book, In Kind. And it does point out an important lesson that I even continue to learn in my life, that, I was your student as an American Taekwondo student between the ages of about 11 and 14, 11 and 15, as you went to grad school, I believe, was your next step. And I just kept on keeping on. And then I started Neill's Taekwondo and Fitness LLC in 2004. and you joined me at that business shortly after I started that journey. And the idea that you could join me taught me a lot.
Hmm.
That it's beyond ego. I don't need to be the one in charge to be able to learn, listen, and follow from one another. And that helped me in my pursuits because I knew as a function that the only way I'm really going to grow is to listen to everybody, from the students to the peers to the mentors and everybody in between. And you never know who you really have to be nice to. Sometimes I'm so nice, people think I'm trying to manipulate them. It's actually odd. They're like, there's something wrong with this guy, Erik. He's a little bit too nice. I made a really great friend being extra nice. I was doing an audition in Long Island City, Queens, with a colleague of mine who also did martial arts and stunts. And we were coming back from a 7-hour audition.
Wow.
There's no question of a doubt that we each burned 1,000 calories, and we just couldn't eat enough food to stay awake driving home from New York safely on the road.
Mm.
So she goes, I've got this buddy, and we always do Taekwondo tournaments together. Tournaments would be a whole other conversation. It's so fun. But in this story, she was talking about how her good tournament buddy lives in Pennsylvania. And she said, if you ever need a place to crash, just call. So we called.
Okay.
Bless their hearts, they took us in. Brandon and
Wow.
𝐸𝐭 took us in, these strange martial arts black belts from lands afar in North Carolina that were over in the Northeast trying to get jobs out of New York. But the long and short of it is I work with Brandon on movies all the time now. And it's his kindness and his willingness to go from being in charge as a highly successful martial arts academy owner and operator to move beyond that business and harvest his business and now go into film where he is just magically successful. And I love associating myself with people that can put that kindness into their work, and they put the work and the kindness above everything else. I I did an audition yesterday. You'll love this.
Yeah.
I can't tell you too much about it because it is a national movie role. So we're
Oh,
going to
cool.
shoot in Texas. I can tell you Texas. And I'll
Mm.
give you a little bit about this character. This guy's a scene stealer. He's intense.
Okay.
But one of his lines is, I collect things that bring me great joy.
Mm.
And it comes at a personal cost. And that's so true to how I operate my life. I only surround my things that bring me great personal joy, but without the great personal cost.
Mm.
Because happiness doesn't have to be at a great cost. You know, there are some people in our martial arts organizations, there will be people in your work organizations, there are going to be people in your nonprofit organizations that need to be unhappy. They have to have that chaos. And I've found that because I perpetuate a very different demeanor in all public environments, people can't bring that to me.
Yeah.
You can't bring chaos to the guy who's like, good morning, how you doing? Good to see you, happy Wednesday. I have people come to me and they recite the day of the week because I'll always say happy Tuesday or happy Wednesday or happy Saturday. And so they come up to me and they go, happy Tuesday, got you first.
Yeah. Well,
It's almost a
I definitely,
competition.
yeah, go ahead.
I was it's almost a competition with yourself
Yeah.
of being a better person by trying your hardest to be nicer. And it's probably the best feeling competition you could have.
Yeah. It's interesting how you talk about kindness and trying to bring joy and trying to really be authentic. And sometimes we are perceived as people, I think it's we are perceived as people who step into a room and we're ready. We're ready for joy to flow. We are ready for good things to happen. And I think that catches a lot of people off guard. Because there are other people who will show up and they will be superficially nice, which I think is very distinctly different from kindness. Do you see a distinction between those two things? And if so, what's the difference between being nice and being kind?
I think the real differentiation is fear. It's fear of acceptance. It's fear of being socially outed or socially awkward. I think it's an inherent human fear because I'm one of those individuals that I'm a little bit of a minimalist. I like to break down everyone's true intention by love and fear, those two base emotions,
Mm.
or their intention to achieve acknowledgement, advancement and challenge, or financial gain. And I really want to work with the people that are all about the advance in knowledge, the personal growth, the love over the fear. And it's okay to embrace your fear and be scared, but using it the right way is 90% of what us actors do. You know, if we're going to be scared, I'm going to give you scared, and you're gonna know that I am scared for a reason. And that reason can be something as simple as, you know, I've got a really big car payment, and next month I'm really not sure how that's going to wash. And I can put that fear where it's constructive to me, and I can put that away instead of having to wear that when I'm in a meeting or when I'm consulting or even potentially trying to be a motivator when I'm so wrapped up in my own fears.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I wanted to mention,
yeah, go ahead.
I brought up my friend Brandon Keaton for a reason. He provided me one of my greatest opportunities in all film.
Oh.
Because when we grew up, as in myself and a young Michael Neece and Taekwondo dojo, we would watch action films. And we would watch Jackie Chan's, Jean-Claude Van Damme's. We would watch the old Bruce Lee's, regardless of his legacy left before we even started the martial arts journey. And I had a call when I was playing golf, no less. I don't even play golf. I was just, you know, hitting some range balls. And Brandon says to me, I've got an opportunity for you. And if I can't do it, you should be doing it. And I said, well, what is that? He said, well, my friend who's producing a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, they need another associate producer. I said, what does that even mean? I don't know what that, you know, I'm in the Screen Actors Guild. I'm in the union. What does that mean? He said, well, it's going to be really easy for them to hire you on the film if you make a donation. You kind of put your money where your mouth is. And I said, okay, all right. Well, let me talk to the producer. And I talked to Jarek Faust, and I talked to the director, James Cullen Presick. And I said, yeah, it's a real commitment. And we really want you out here, and you're going to spend a week in California, and we're going to make a movie. What do you say? We need to know in the next 3 hours.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I pulled the trigger, and I did it. And it was one of the best career decisions I've made. It hasn't gotten me a direct relation to more jobs. It hasn't reaped a massive financial reward. It was just so fulfilling. I mean, I watched this guy on the screen for decades, and he was a hero of mine in martial arts. Jean-Claude Van Damme is an extraordinarily talented martial artist and movie creator, and I got to do a scene with him. I mean, he knocked me out. That was Officer Stanislav. And I was just dumbstruck at the idea that was my job that day. I walk into the makeup trailer, and I see a guy in wardrobe that is a Korean American martial artist. His instructor happens to be Master Simon Rhee of movie fame from Best of the Best. And I've been following his movie career for 10 years, and I meet him in the makeup trailer.
Wow.
So I'm fanboying with this stunt guy, like, oh my gosh, I know your work. And he's like, this is weird. And then our colleague that we're working with, his name is Sean Rhee. Sean Rhee's grandfather is Grandmaster Jun Rhee, as in the godfather of American Taekwondo.
Right.
These are the men that trained with General Choi Hung-hai, who created the word Taekwondo in Korea, if those historians get their lessons. But the notion that we started as hapless, unknowing little towhead boys in Chapel Hill. And now I'm in Burbank, California, working with legends and family members of legends of martial arts and heritage and history. I was so honored. And I still reach out to those guys these days and say, you know, keep it up. You're doing great work. Hope you're doing all right. Happy 25. And it feels so good for them to just say,
it's wonderful. That's so cool and so exciting because I mean, every movie that comes out these days with Donnie Yen, I mean, I'm first in line to go watch it, you know, and I'm always, you know, rewinding the various segments in Ip Man movies, and so to actually be in their presence, one is tempted to ask on this particular podcast, How kind did you feel like you were treated? What was it like? Did you feel like you were warmly welcome in all of that?
Well, I was definitely warmly welcomed. I was advocated to the producers by a mutual friend, and he was just so inclusive and positive and nice. And the director and the producer felt saved.
Wow, it's great.
Now that's already in distribution, I can tell you that they had a little change in staff. So the
Ah,
director was wearing two hats, and
okay.
they were a little bit over budget and past date. And so they needed a hand, and they needed a creative that was in it for the film and
Right.
not in it to beat up Jean-Claude Van Damme or in it to get an extra line or in it to reap some kind of massive financial reward. And I think we found a great match. Um, those guys are fantastic content creators, and I would be lucky to work with them again. James Cullen Prestick and Jared Faust, um, Josh David too, and just all these Josh David Shepard, excuse me, all these fantastic folks that reached out to me and were most definitely very kind.
Mm.
And they invited me to the rap party, which was so sweet. I would love to be able to be affluent enough in the acting community to go to a party just one random evening in Burbank.
Wonderful. Gosh, how incredible that you are living this new life, and I'm so excited for you. Um, I'm hoping that you can give us just an exclusive on you're writing and you're producing your own film. Is there anything that you feel comfortable just telling us about so that, whet our appetite? Because I know it's not going to release until, 2026, but, what are the things you can tell us?
Well, I can tell you a few things. I'm working with a conglomerate of production companies
Mm,
to make this dream come true. And I've worked with them and other projects, which is the reason why we continue to have those relationships. And they're extraordinarily kind people. They're empathetic. They're creators. They sacrifice for their work as much as they commit to it. Um, I can give you the log line. So we're marketing currently online and submitting to multiple script writing competitions. The log line is when two loving brothers are grieving on the anniversary of a lost family member. They're out on a lovely hike when they discover that the autistic adult has an innate ability to access pocket dimensions, and a government program will stop at nothing to control it,
that sounds
right?
so cool. Yeah.
So there's a
That's
lot of inspirations, and I like to say it's a cross between um, a little bit of Rain Man meets fringe science. So it's super fun.
very cool. That sounds wonderful. Um, all right, we're now at the point where I'm going to ask you some of the questions that I ask all of our guests. Um, just the goals of our Future is Kind podcast. We have two, right? One of them is to talk about what does the future look like if we're doing all the right things, and then the other is to say what are all of those right things. So let's address the first things first. I want you to visualize with me, if you will, Erik. It is 2125. It is 100 years from now. If we're doing all the right things, what does that world look like? And you can skip the flying cars and all the cool technology, but what does it look like? How do you interact with the world and other people there?
My fantasy about 100 years in the future, where our society does everything right and behaviorally allows themselves to grow, empathize, and collaborate, it is very much it resembles a little bit of Starfleet from Star Trek that we nerded out on so hard as young adults and even enjoy now. That wonderful fantasy where the real prime goal of the species is to be compassionate, to spread knowledge and influence, to be a peaceful civilization, to coexist with any and everything. And I would love for that to be human nature. I do believe, however, that fear is stronger than kindness.
Mhm.
And once you have one of those innate fears, um, it's the cancer in the cells. It's the toxin in the well the base fear about anything in your life is going to rapidly and dramatically affect your capacity to project kindness. And that doesn't mean you don't have to be afraid. That just means you have to put your fears in the right place. Because if you want kindness in return, you've just got to dish it out. And I have a funny friend who's a very highly trained behavior analyst. And I'm not going to out him for who he is. But he was telling me, there are some people in our gym, in our community, that just really are social. And I don't know if this is out of spite. Am I being judged? Am I imposing on people? Am I intimidating them? What's the problem? And I tried to help him understand, as I've tried to understand complicated relationships in my adult life, that sometimes the best relationship you can have with someone is to not interact with them.
Great.
And for someone,
yeah.
Well, thank you. It's been a big struggle for me. I used to intimidate students and even potential clients at my martial arts academy with my extroversion and my kindness. And as I've grown as a parent and as a person, I'd like to think, one of the hardest parts is when someone is taxed or overwhelmed by your kindness. And this has really drawn me to understand their neurodivergent population. Another reason why my movie has an autistic adult man in it. And the character himself resembles an adult with level 2 symptoms of adult autism. That means different things to different people. But he struggles at being verbal. He's very codependent on his brother. Thus the love story that we can all understand between siblings. That is the foundation of the film. And so I had students that were just always the happiest and smiled the biggest. And I remember one amazing student. She was always bubbling over with kindness. And she had her struggles. She had hard days. And she had failures and achievements in martial arts. But I remember this autistic adult. She was just an example to me of you don't have to be the highest functioning person to be able to share joy. You don't have to be wealthy. And you certainly don't have to be a heterosis white male with a 6-degree black belt. Looking outside ourselves is one of the hardest parts, I think, about sharing our kindness. But in 100 years, to get back to our point, it would look like our society really needs to perpetuate knowledge and empathy over power, greed, and a collaborative effort to be dominant, because I think that's based in fear.
Right. I think that's a lovely vision of the future. I love the fact that you have brought up extroversion and introversion and people who are neurodiverse, because my hope is that our future is inclusive of people who don't want to necessarily talk to you, right? People who, it's like, let me go do my thing, you go do your thing, and we'll call it a day. And I want to make sure that those folks feel as welcome at any part of, societal organization in the future as possible, because all different kinds of people are they're treasures, right? Out of this entire universe, each person that you ever meet is the only version of that person you're ever going to have a chance to meet, right? I mean, out of all the vastness of the cosmos, you're the only Erik Neill who's a 6-degree black belt, who's a stunt, artist, and who's an actor and a producer and a writer and all of these cool things. The things that you bring to this universe are unique and irreplaceable. And so if anybody who is more introverted and doesn't really want to have a lot of interactions, or somebody who's neurodiverse and processes information in different ways, man, I want those people at the table. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's also part of my vision of the future, is like everybody who shows up in good faith, they don't have to show up the same as each other. Just show up, right? And be kind. Okay, awesome. So the other big question is, what are those big things to get us to that future? And specifically, Are there things that you, Erik Neill, do as a practice, as a ritual to keep yourself grounded and inspired and thoughtful about how to treat your fellow human being?
I do a couple of things. And I think it includes a regular attempt and effort to reach out. I remember I had a college roommate that I really never got along with after we moved apart. And I struggled to understand it until I realized he's a narcissist. And it doesn't mean I don't love him, but I don't have a relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
And dramatic things happen to us as young adults in our 20s. We are no longer with the people that are our peers or friend group all the time, every day. And if it is, you're doing grad school or undergrad or whatever, or you're working multiple jobs, because, at least two. the the inherent environment is people that you might not choose to be around, and that's going to be your friend group unless you make a concerted effort to spend hundreds of hours investing in actual friendship. And one of my dear friends was a neighbor for a long time. When we made a ritual, it was Friday night. We sat at my cast-room and we discussed the ways of the world and told lies and celebrated with imbibing drinks and laughed at ourselves and others at everyone's expense. And after he crawled back to his condominium and I battened down mine, we kept that ritual for a number of years. And to this day, we still propagate that. And last night we just had dinner together because it takes a real concerted effort. I want to see in the future of humanity that empathy is not considered a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
I really like anime cartoons that have martial arts because empathy is always the weakness. And we find out from the hero that it is their true source of power.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great theme. It's propagated through all of them. And that's why we enjoy watching them, especially as martial artists. And I think martial arts taught that to us in particular. And another reason why we can share a wonderful friendship as adults. But it really does take an investment of energy and time. My father's a very binary person. They're one way or the other.
Okay.
He's had a terminal cancer diagnosis for almost 3 years. And coming to terms with his mortality and us discussing life as well as the end of life and all the things we enjoy about life, things can become very much one or the other. And my father has very low tolerance for things that cost him personally and that do not bring him joy. And just like that funny audition I had yesterday, he's taught me those. He used to drop me off at school, Carborough Elementary School, class of '86. He would drop me off right at the side of the school at what they call the kiss and go lane. Adorable.
Mm.
And he would say, "Have a fun day. It's your job." And the first time he said that, I remember going, "What do you mean it's my job?" He says, "Well, my job is to go sell houses. I sell real estate. That's Dad's job. And your job is to go to school and have fun."
Mm.
And I said, "I thought my job was to learn things." He
Right.
said, "Well, what are you going to learn if you're not having fun at it?" And I realized I'm never going to learn anything unless it's fun. And so I'll create joy for the pure intention of trying to learn. And then, of course, I can learn from my autistic students. I can learn from students that were once my teacher that are now my student, that are my teacher again. I can learn from every venue as long as I've chosen to be a learner and to be the student, to check the ego, to be empathetic, to go the extra mile of harvesting relationships that are positive.
Leaning into those positive energies that enter our lives, I think, is also how I navigate in the world. It's the idea of taking those people who bring you that great energy and really investing in it. Don't be afraid, guys. If you're out there taking notes on what Erik is saying right now, you got your notebook out and whatnot, underline some of this stuff, because leaning into those people and also trying to cultivate your own joy, those are just such great tips. Can you tell us, are there any podcasts? Are there any movies, TV shows, books, anything that you turn to when you want to be inspired, when you want to be thinking about how good things can be? Can you name us a few of those things? If not, I can always ask you and we'll put it in the show notes. But
I could definitely name some of those things.
yeah.
Some of those things are pieces of nostalgia that I enjoy. I enjoy a funny cartoon with my daughter that is absolutely ridiculous, and it was created well before she was even born.
Mm.
It's called Invader Zim,
Hmm.
and Invader Zim is a tiny little alien, and the people, the planet that he's from, their society hierarchy is based on who's the tallest, and
Oh.
so the tallest are in charge. Well, Zim is teeny tiny,
Mm.
and they hate him because he really wants to prove himself.
Mm.
And so they just got rid of him by shoving him in the worst possible part of the universe, an actual trash heap amongst awful planets, Earth. And so he thinks it's his job to take over.
Ah.
And he's not good at what he does, but he's so confident and proud of himself.
Mm.
He'll say, "Good job, me."
I love it.
Does that, right? And it brings me great joy, but so does a very involved story. One of
Mm.
my favorite stories is another nostalgic cartoon, uh, Avatar: Last Airbender. It's about so much growth. You know, one main character goes from confident and privileged and well trained and overbearing and egomaniacal, and at the end he's humbled and he's helping and he's inclusive and he just huge curve. And then another character is the exact opposite. And it's so beautiful to watch that growth because they explain the empathy of needing control, but then experiencing loss. And the
Mm.
loss is the loss of the kindness.
Yeah.
And sometimes the simple losses are the hardest to deal with. Um, there's a character who sings a song, and he's a leader. He's a great general,
Mm.
and he led a great battle.
Mm.
And he was fighting an unwinnable siege for almost a year or more, and he found out his only son died in the war.
Oh.
Now, these aren't real people, but these are real people's feelings. These are real people's lives that have felt this.
Yeah.
And he sings a song that says goodbye. And you can hear in his voice that this is the kindness.
Mm.
And that's
That
powerful.
that's really
Yeah.
powerful. Yeah. I Good storytelling doesn't have a single medium. Good storytelling
Yes.
can be in song and it can be in anime and it can be in books. It can be wherever you seek it out, and create it. So I'm really thrilled to have you on this podcast, Erik, because I've always thought of you as a very kind human being. I know that, no person is perfect, but as I am trying to reach out to experts who can teach us about kindness so that we can discuss it in front of our audience and they have a chance to then, um, loop back to those experts and get more guidance from you. Um, in our show notes, we're going to include how people can get in touch with you. So if anybody out there has questions for Erik Neill, you want to reach out directly to him, you'll have that opportunity. But yeah, any last bits of wisdom that you want to share with the Our Future is Kind podcast viewership?
Sure. My last words of wisdom are something that are pretty cliche, but really ring true to me, is to know yourself. I think as a function of knowing yourself, you know what motivates you. Are you doing something for your financial achievement? Are you doing it for the challenge? Are you doing it for the acknowledgement? And what's getting in your way? Is it the
Mm.
love or is it the fear? And when you know yourself, you don't have to guess. You don't have to
Mm.
make excuses. You don't have to do do overs. And hopefully you understand why things go the way they do, and you don't regret it. I was watching an interview, not unlike this one, and it was an actor who had worked on a production, and he treated the director like garbage. Just argumentative, yelled at her, demeaned her, and he saw her 14 years later and went over to her at a coffee shop where she was with her husband, her spouse, and openly apologized of how awful he had treated her at that time because it caused him so much loss in his own kindness. He lost sleep about it. He didn't understand it. He knew that it was a problem and he didn't do anything about it. And he was embarrassed by it. And in the long run, it hurt him. And he made it about himself because it was never a conflict with her. She was put together enough to not make it about herself. In my opinion, she was doing a lot better than our actor colleague. But he doesn't know what came of that interaction. He was so embarrassed, he quickly left and excused himself. But it gave him some closure to know that he's not operating out of fear, out of anger, and he's come to terms with knowing himself. And that's a daily goal for me too, friend. Sorry if my notifications are going awry.
Oh no, we're all good, and we understand that you have a fan club, so go get them. But I think we have to reemphasize this for everybody in the audience because it's powerful what you were just talking about. The best way to know the path of integrity is to step off of it and recognize that you were off of it and try to get back on. And so I love that story where, there's recognition, there's that reflection, there's that eating up inside, and then doing something about it. If you don't do something about it, you just live in shame and it gets worse and your own life gets worse. So I love the story that you told, and I think we're going to just leave it there. So Erik Walker Neill, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Michael Neece. I feel like it's the best, kindest podcast I could have ever done.
Wonderful. Each episode, we issue a kindness challenge. And this episode's is to realistically evaluate your relationships. As Erik Neill says, if you feel you should have someone in your life, then engage with them deliberately. If they're toxic and harmful to you in some way, then you're in no obligation to keep them in your life. Once you evaluate your relationships realistically, then make time for those who contribute positive energy to your life and reduce your exposure to anyone who brings toxicity to you. Another part of the kindness challenge is nurture a friendship. It could be a neighbor or a work friend, but reach out and actually make time for each other. Every episode, we also like to give you inspiration and depictions of kindness in the world. Erik Neill recommends the 2 TV shows Invader Zim and Avatar: The Last Airbender. Enjoy. Thanks again for listening to our Future is Kind podcast, a podcast in search of a kinder future. Go out there and do something kind.